So how much weight would it actually take to crack through a Verdugo's carapace? Way more than you might imagine, so stick around for my crackhead math towards the end where we will discuss all of that. Shortly after Las Plagas was discovered, it became clear that the variability in use for the parasite was far beyond your typical animal. Not only could it inspire changes in the bodies of those infected, expressed as an uncontrollable growth of parasitic tendrils that ran through the entire body, but also it could be directed and controlled, all with just a little bit of forethought. Due to humans' natural curiosity with refining and changing the human meat suit to control and extend the capabilities of our bodies, experiments would be conducted in order to create the perfect specimen that was capable of carrying out the will of its masters. This dark road of experimentation led to A, some massive human rights violations, 2, creatures capable of overwhelming highly trained agents in some cases, and D, a massive case of entomophobia. Some of these experimentations combined with human loyalties and the aforementioned insectoid influence would result in one creature in particular that haunted 2005 Roanoke's dreams more so than the unsteady breathing of the regenerator. This dubious creature, who liked to prank him, John, would be known as a Verdugo. The Verdugo, having its name mean literally executioner in Spanish, would serve its name well, as two would come into being after several experimentations also led to a failed version, which most people kind of forget, but we'll mention him here momentarily. These two would serve as the right and left hands of Ramon Salazar, doing his bidding and confronting Leon as necessary or directed. But what exactly made them so lethal? Well, in today's episode, let's discuss the lore and morphology of the Verdugo in Resident Evil 4's Remake. But first, this episode is sponsored by Factor. Too busy to cook this May because you have a bunch of things planned, like turning 31 in 2 days, realizing that life is limited and nobody knows what happens after the fact? You are? Well, then do I have an offer for you? To make the most of that limited time, we all know that maintaining a healthy weight and active lifestyle increases quality of life. By going with these fresh, never frozen meals from Factor, you can help hit your caloric goals by aiming for their low-calorie meal options. Or if you're trying to bulk up like I currently am, their Protein Plus meals offer 30 grams of protein per serving. So, to be honest, they do send me these boxes to test out, but it's never really all that necessary, although it is appreciated, because after trying a few of their meals during my first sponsorship with them, I ended up going with a weekly recurring delivery service of their meals, which has been fantastic for my health. Having hit 30 a year ago, which is horrifying, I noticed that I was more tired and I was gaining weight and my muscular strength was actually starting to decline, probably because my diet was crap, which made me want to, not work out. I'm not scheduled for a testosterone decline for another 4 years, so it didn't have to do with getting older, basically just bad choices. But with these delicious dietitian approved meals, I was hooked, and since then I've lost around 19 pounds of fat and put on around 10 pounds of lean muscle, and I haven't felt this good in like years. It really did help me achieve my goals. And with their new breakfast items such as apple cinnamon pancakes, bacon and cheddar egg bites, and breakfast skillets, you can now meal replace your breakfast and cut out the fast food for the protein dense choices that'll help you stay fuller for longer. With only 2 minutes in the microwave for a delicious meal, I mean, what's not to like? So if that sounds good to you, then by heading to factor75.com and using code Roanoke50, you can get 50% off your first Factor box today. All right, let's get back to it. So first things first, let's make a designation before we get into the anatomical breakdown of the Verdugo's body and how it was altered. Known as the U2, there's a reason for this. This line is a type of BOW that would continue on as the parasite would be used to create these biological agents. What I find interesting is that really the U1 is not mentioned at all, or really much at all, and there are hints that the U1 may have actually just been one of the Verdugo that was created. So one's U2 and the other one's U1. However, what is a little strange is they're both referenced as U2 as well, so it's kind of hard to really make that designation. But the U3, as we all know, was the giant centaur man bug thing that would eat your head in the original Resident Evil 4, and for some reason he's absent in Resident Evil 4 Remake. I'm not really sure why. But with the U8 actually being a continuation of this line in Resident Evil 5, the refinement of these BOWs would continue on presumably even as the vectors of this disease changed. Which, speaking of, I had someone ask why these viruses change and how there's actually no connection between the games, like between the original T-virus and the subsequent outbreaks of Las Plagas, and I would have to disagree. I'm not sure if this is going completely off topic, but it has its root in the T-virus, at least Las Plagas does. And considering every species appears to be able to be infected by the virus regardless of circumstances, it appears to me that this infection really has no barriers. Hailing from the progenitor strain, it originates in a plant, specifically some really old flowers that were found underground. So it's basically just a virus that can infect everything. Sort of like why, how humans can't be infected by Dutch elm's disease and trees can't catch HIV. Now just imagine everybody could catch everything and everything everything on this planet can catch everything. That's essentially what the progenitor virus does. So from here, it would jump several species, whether that be mold, animals, other plants, and so on and so forth. So it's the same infection, just presenting different and achieving multiple vector points in order to continue to infect. So all the games are in fact connected in some way, and also there is an overarching story that is just super deep lore and it's everywhere. So it's all connected. You just gotta kind of look for it. It's like an anthology series of infection. But I'm getting way off topic now, so back to the Verdugo. The Verdugo itself would originate through the experimentation with Las Plagas, as mentioned earlier. Its initial origins would be of a similar method to how the Novistador would be created, pretty sure I said that correctly, but with the reverse process. Before human testing would be conducted, which seems a little restrained actually for the Los Illuminados, all things considering, human genes would be initially spliced into insects utilizing the parasite. Due to the human genes coding for certain factors like height, weight, and vision, this would produce insects that were much larger, but in general still behaved and looked like insects. This raised a problem with continuing the use of the insect platform with human genes. The creatures were just not really that intelligent enough and would still behave much like how insects would, basically just animal-driven instincts. Over time, as researchers became more and more familiar with how the base creature would further impact up the line, human experimentations became more and more of the standard to use. Essentially, this would cause a shift from the insect platform with human genes to a human platform with insect genes to achieve the desired results. Ultimately, this would result in the Verdugo. The process would go as follows. A human would be voluntold for the program. I mean, I guess technically not voluntold, but we'll get there in a second. While the journal entries make note of this being something the person wanted, this is really because they were under the influence of Las Plagas, as noted when the entries go from concern for Ramon to concern for themselves, and then how they're just trapped and they can hear the experimentations, and then to like complete elation about being infected, and then to their devotion to the project and how excited they are. The two Verdugo would initially be created and would serve as Ramon's bodyguards, who were originally known to Ramon prior. The first Verdugo was created, and that was initially the castle's housekeeper, or castle keeper as they're known, who was apparently quite old, having served Ramon's father prior. Over time, she observed with internal conflict how Ramon would go on to join the Los Illuminados, releasing the parasite that his ancestors helped drive underground 8 generations ago, and through her blind loyalty though, she would remain committed to Ramon and would continue to back him until the end. Upon her infection with Las Plagas, again, she volunteered herself, but did she really? Going to go with a giant no on this one because there's no freaking way. That was total parasitic influence. But the castle researcher, known as Isidro Urati Talavera, totally said that wrong too, go on to conduct the experiments utilizing the parasite as a medical tool in order to manipulate her genetic coding by splicing in insect DNA. This is presumably why they named it U2 for Uriati. The work that he had done was integral to creating all of this, so I mean, I guess you do get to name it after yourself. So why was it his middle name though? Nobody's quite sure. I guess if you're that integral to creating it, you can name it whatever you want to name it. I mean, it's your choice, man. But he was responsible for creating the Novistadors as well, and the wretched abomination known as the U3, which even Sadler just refers to it as it during a senior moment. Oddly enough, this researcher would also grow attached to Ramon after his successful alteration to the housekeeper through years of painful experimentation, and decided that he too wanted to undergo this process and become one of the trusted of Ramon. Not sure why? Probably the parasite. And I mean, I suppose once someone else has successfully gone through this sort of transition into this creature, it would make it less painful on you, as you kind of know the pitfalls, and you kind of know what to expect as well. But at the completion of Verdugo 1, he would then become one himself, becoming the left hand of Ramon, wearing the black coat, while the castle keeper wore the red coat. Serving as highly efficient bodyguards, these creatures are vastly more intelligent than the Novistadors due to the simple fact that they have a human mind that has been altered by insect genes, rather than having an insect mind that's altered by human genes. The differences would become staggering, as you can kind of think of it like an 80-20 split, so to speak. Due to them being like 80% homegrown humans still, despite their body not looking like it, their brain is 80% homegrown human. Their physical morphology as well as their intellect would far outclass the standard infected, but their lethality brought on by the insect genetics would make them an absolute unit in close quarters. Even for the highly trained agents with a rocket launcher who's an absolute Chad. If you had a pistol at your disposal only, you're getting Shrek'd. But what sort of physical changes would be brought on by these genetics, and how would this alter the human form? It's a great question to ask, listener. You're a pretty smart dude. So the Verdugo, whether it be the left hand of Ramon, which has been said to come off, or the right hand, which is just straight up bailing in the remake. No, really. The original Resident Evil 4, you overcome the left hand of Salazar, which we'll go over momentarily, as the original Castle Keeper then merges with Salazar to form the giant monster that you have to fight. In the remake, the right hand is nowhere to be found, and I guess at some point, she just sort of left Salazar, never to be seen again. There's no explanation as to why this is the case, but if I had to guess, I'd say we probably are going to see her again before too much longer, maybe in some like DLC or something. But anyhow, The Verdugo, being a combination and the complete human genome accompanied with the extra information brought on by the insect genome, has created a creature that is quite lithe in appearance but has a fairly staggering height. Standing at over 8 feet tall, and some people say 8 feet 5 inches, but 8 feet is the general accepted height, that's about 243.8 centimeters in non-freedom units. This would allow for the Verdugo to not only tower over the average adult male's height, being something of a psychologically imposing foe, but also basically double the size of Ramon Salazar, as he never grew to his projected height due to an illness that most people in the castle had wished had taken him, as he was referred to Pulgarcito, which means little thumb in Spanish. Also, big woman good, which apparently, well, she's an insect, so that, never mind, it doesn't work. But apparently this hurt his feelings, as not only did he end up torturing and destroying the castle keeper who had called him that, but he mentions it several times during Leon's confrontation with him, completely, like, unprompted. It's real manlet behavior. Just remember, boys, tall bones, tall people's bones specifically, are more prone to snapping from the same sort of forces enacted on them, as opposed to short king's bones that can handle it with ease. Neanderthal gang rise up. Now, the interesting thing about combining genomes with two creatures is it can have a surprising effect, such as increasing the overall weight and height of creatures, or just their size in general. Consider it along the same lines as like a liger. The liger, being a combination of both a lion and a tiger, is much larger than both parents due to the extra push of genetic information coding for similar things, allowing for it to reach a larger status. This is expressed in the Verdugo as well. The entire body of the Verdugo is covered with a thick exoskeleton that is stronger than steel. This allows for the creature to survive unreal levels of damage. But you may be asking yourself, why exactly is this the case, and how could it possibly accomplish this? I just put like 18 8-gauge shells into this thing. Well, to understand just how strong this creature is and why it would be this way, we must first get a good grasp of its morphology to understand the interconnecting plates. Starting with the feet, we see many structural changes have happened not only here, but with the rest of the body as well, due to the additional insect genetics, which internally we'll go over like the physiological changes in a moment that were forced by the additional genes, but externally this has forced a change as well, as we can all see. The feet have lost all human structuring with a hint of a new order of animal. The Verdugo's foot is technically speaking digitigrade, that it now walks on the balls of its feet, likely owing this arrangement to its human genetics, but also when it runs, it will just straight up run on its toes rather than the balls of its feet, and this definitely comes from insects. The feet themselves are covered in a thick chitinous segmented exoskeleton that is pigmented quite dark. The end of the front portion of the foot sports only about 2 toes each tipped, with a claw made out of the chitin that is several inches in length. Ascending up the foot, we see the armoring on the foot continues, but also there are 2 claws that jut out the back of the foot to sort of help stabilize it when it runs. Even further up the ankle joint, we see that on this creature there is another pair of smaller protrusions. These are more likely vestigial than anything else. This may just be, in fact, again, it's probably just a formation on the chitin itself, which is also seen all over the body, but there's really no meat underneath. Moving up the leg, you see in general that the leg is increased in size by another about 2 feet. Each of the long bones would have grown, and the process is described as almost agonizing for the person. Well, not almost agonizing. It's completely agonizing for the person going through it, which, I mean, I actually mentioned this in my dog soldiers video, growing pains. I had a lot of them growing up, but I can't imagine how painful it would be for like a person who's like 6'5", or for this person who's 8 feet tall. Obviously, this would require the reactivation of the growth plates on the ends of the log bone, and actually, if I remember correctly, there's also areas of growth in the center, but this is the epiphyseal plate. Along with this, you can definitely expect osteoclasts to be breaking down the bone to allow it to grow, and then osteoblasts later on coming in to form more of the bone. The structure in the leg itself is not digitigrade, actually, but plantigrade, which is interesting as the creature walks on the balls of its feet. Yet the knees are quite human. So actually, I'm going to revise that. It's not like it's exactly digitigrade, but it's not exactly like it's plantigrade either. So that means it would basically be half digitigrade. It's basically, because it is a combination of 2 different animals, boom, you get basically half of it. This would put more strain on areas like the Achilles tendon in this creature, but as for weight, I do not believe it would matter much, as the creature's exoskeleton helps to bear the weight instead of it just being on the internal pressure like the endoskeletons, ligaments, and tendons. So it's safe to also assume that internally, muscles are likely to grow and keep up with the body, just like any other growth on the body is going to keep up with itself. Did that make sense? Hopefully. The connection point at the pelvis may hint at weaknesses that should exist, as we can see the chitin is thinner in this area, but this does not hold up again to scrutiny when you actually attack it. Although the joints of the exoskeleton creature are by natural compulsion going to be a weaker area, as the chitin must be more malleable or entirely absent so that the joint can actually move. In this one, it just does not seem to do much of anything. You can attack it there, or you can attack it center mass where the plates are the largest, it just does the same thing. The abdomen of this creature is the same as everywhere else, except the plates are more segmented, allowing for them to slide past one another so that the creature can actually maintain its movement and bend forward. The thoracic region is the same, with a large chest piece spanning to the shoulder regions, protecting the sensitive joint, or the would-be sensitive joint. Shoulder pauldron-esque protections flank the anterior sides of the shoulder and above to protect the shoulder, which continues down to about mid-humerus bone. The biceps and triceps are protected by similar plating. The forearm has increased in length massively, much like the long bones of the leg did, likely the size of a standard human male's leg. This gives them incredible reach, but the real change is in the hands. The hands now have 3 protrusions, 2 finger-like protrusions, and basically these are made out of claws, with one sitting opposite the other 2 fingers, but this is going to act like a thumb, so to speak. So just remember they're made out of claws, or they're made out of chitin, so they're basically just large claws. But this allows for the Verdugo to grasp any would-be assailant. The chitinous protrusions end with a sharp point. Around the backside of the Verdugo exists the same covering and large overlapping segmented plates, which allow for it to stand upright and then lean over without locking up the exoskeleton. Eventually, these segments continue into a fully functional prehensile tail. Again, it's interesting to see some of the primate traits stick around in this creature. The tail is much like a 5th limb for the Verdugo. Insanely fast and just as protected as the rest of the body, it is able to whip this tail around at a high rate of speed to inflict damage on any person that so chooses. And if this were a real life thing and you didn't have armor on, it would basically just cut you in half exceedingly easy. At the end of this tail exists a scythe-like blade made out of chitin that can impale exceedingly easy and slice through bones with basically no problem. Which, speaking of that, let's discuss how this was achieved here in a second, because finally, I forgot we have to move up to the head. The head and face region is replaced with insectoid mandibles which cover the maxilla of the face. The nose is largely missing and replaced by insect-segmented smaller plates, as the eyes and forehead region are very much so human. The brain has been largely preserved, with the carapace continue on about the back of the head. Pasty white skin and orange eyes are seen, which is the standard with other infected who have been basically infected with Las Plagas. Internally, some changes would be brought on by the genetic alteration of the human that were quite advantageous, but some would result in changes that were less than stellar. So let's begin with the advantageous mutation first. I mean, depending on what you call advantageous, anything other than a homegrown human meat suit isn't really advantageous in my line of thinking. The epidermis of the castle keeper and the researcher would have been largely overhauled, much like what we see within insects. The epidermis, after having been encoded with this information for making chitin, would begin to secrete the substance. In insects, chitin is a major component of the exoskeleton and the peritrophic matrix. Essentially, chitin synthase is a vital enzyme which helps to create chitin from a large transmembrane protein that actually comes from something known as the family 2 glycosyltransferase. Long word, but essentially it is an enzyme coded for within insects' DNA. Upon this being introduced to the genetic structuring of likely the skin of a human, they too would form this large protein membrane. Quickly, this person would have begun secreting chitinous material that would then likely harden and mature into its outer shell now. Now the issue is, because human skin is different in a lot of ways than insect skin, it's likely the molting process or the removal of the exoskeleton, or at least the escape of the creature from the exoskeleton as the Verdugo would grow, would have been exceedingly painful. Having the chitin rip away skin that may actually take the skin with it as it continued to grow to 8 feet. With some measurements, again putting it around 8 feet 5 inches. But what is chitin? Again, you can think of it as like a stronger form of keratin, which is what our hair is made out of. As the chitin grows, it is able to form interconnected plates that would protect the softer tissue underneath. And if you think taking a shotgun blast to the body at point blank is impossible to resist, well, think again, you huge nerd.
Monkey.
Because look no further than the diabolical ironclad beetle. That's right. These beetles actually lost their ability to fly a long time ago and still enjoy moving around the dirt and under trees. But as you might guess, what is like near the dirt and in trees? Birds. Over time, the chitin in their body left the strongest of them to survive attacks by these birds. Today, the ironclad beetle, as its name implies, is ironclad. They can survive being crushed by something up to 39,000 times their own weight. For reference, they weigh about 0.5 grams or about 0.001 pounds. And to the human mind, that means absolutely nothing. I mean, I don't really mess around with metric too much, but I'm pretty sure everybody who hears 0.5 grams, they don't really know what that looks like, so we're about to get into some quick maths. Multiply that out by 39,000, they can resist weight up to 19,500 grams or up to 39 pounds of weight on them. Doesn't sound like much, but when you realize the average 5-year-old is about 40 pounds and about 19,500 grams, you can kind of see the weight of these creatures and the weight that they can actually bear is pretty insane. So if you brought that strength or extrapolated out up to 8 feet in height, the beetle being just 3 centimeters long, let's see, that's 8 feet is 43.8 centimeters as mentioned earlier. So if that tracks the same, that means based on on height or just overall size, given the ideal weight calculator of it being around 52 kilograms plus 1.9 kilograms for every inch over 5 feet, that would put it at around 129.9 kilograms, but given the fact that it also has chitin all over its body, that could easily add another, conservatively speaking, 22.68 kilograms, giving us a total of 152.58 kilograms, or this thing's a hefty boy, 336.38 pounds. Again, extrapolate that out to 39,000 times that weight that it can handle, which means it could easily be able to not break under 5,950,620 kilograms or 13,118,820 pounds. You want to know what that actually means, visually, that you can think of? Because again, when dealing with numbers like that, it's hard to imagine. The Saturn V rocket weighed roughly about 6.2 million pounds fully fueled, or roughly 2.8 million kilograms. The Verdugo could have 2 Saturn V rockets stacked on it, fully fueled, and have about 700,000 pounds left to spare. So just those 2 rockets, that's the weight of about 800 elephants on it, and it still couldn't crack its carapace. So you can see why firing point blank into this thing does little, if anything. For fighting your standard human, this mutation would be highly advantageous, making it almost impossible for a normal person to break through, and just forget hand-to-hand combat, you are not getting through that. Now, a large enough caliber round could impact the carapace with enough force that the energy transfer behind the chitin will actually form a bubble behind it, and this will go into the body, which can in turn damage the Verdugo, but this would be something that could possibly be done by a 50 caliber round. We actually discussed this in my Quiet Place episode, that strong armor doesn't make you invincible because of how the energy of the round will still bleed into the body, but small arms would do very little, if anything, against the Verdugo. It's sort of like if you take a hit on a bulletproof vest, you will still most definitely have a giant bruise there because the energy is still hitting you. Now, one of the drawbacks to the mutations of the Verdugo is the intellect was slightly affected by the combination with the insect. While they possess the ability to think and act as well as and hunt effectively like humans do, they still have suffered to a degree, as most do after being infected with Las Plagas. One of the interesting aspects, however, is if you fail a knife attack on the Verdugo or fail to block it, it will wag its finger at you, meaning that it absolutely does possess the ability to abstractly think, and it's not just running on the orders of higher ups and it thinks you suck. The person is still somewhat in there, although their ability to conceptualize their actions has been largely diminished. Because after all, if you were infected with a parasite that wanted to basically take over the entire species and turn them into monsters, would you really want to be helping out that plan? Would you want it to come to fruition, or would your conscience take over? I believe it would be the latter, but the Plagas prevents this from happening. Now, just because you're covered with chitin that can protect you from most things doesn't mean that you are safe from a nerd who's got nothing but time to keep trying to take you out. It's me, I'm that nerd. The issue with that is, though, you also fail a lot. Should the Verdugo get a hold of you, there are no pretenses. There is no dropping you down a bottomless pit with spikes at the bottom and assuming that you were just taken care of, or leaving you in a room populated by sharks with lasers attached to their freaking head to take out your mortal enemy before closing the door and assuming, again, everything went to plan. No, the Verdugo just takes you out quickly. Grabbing Leon's arms, he will pin him down before using his tail to enter Leon's skull between the eyes, and this destroys a lower portion of Leon's brain, like the pons midbrain, likely destroying the optic nerve as well, which would easily leave him in a vegetative state. However, the tail continues through the brainstem and out the back of the head. With this much of the brain destroyed, this would not only lead to an instant hemorrhage and a massive proportion of the brain being destroyed, which that's going to be an issue, but it would also flatline you immediately once the brainstem is hit, giving you no chance of getting back up. An efficient way to take somebody out, you don't have to worry about it, they are 100% done. Now here's the thing, old Papa Roanoke, when I lose in anything, will come back with a vengeance. Just ask Skull Kid from Majora's Mask when I got wrecked too early in the game because I went up there without doing most of the game, thinking I could take him on, and I couldn't. So then I came back with a Fierce Deity mask and just decimated him, and then restarted it, and then killed him again. Should you use enough liquid nitrogen and freeze him, this will render the chitin momentarily brittle. This allows for more energy to pass through the chitin, if not the lead itself, which injures the Verdugo on a greater level. Doing this enough times will cause the body to experience internal bleeding, which in turn will put it down. Of course, there is another way. Fierce Infinity Rocket Launcher time. If you happen to be an absolute unit and sell everything that you have right up until your body in the game, you can come back with that rocket launcher. But in a testament to this thing's durability, it will take several shots to take it out. Like even the main boss, if you knock him with one rocket launcher hit, it'll basically throw you into the second phase of the boss fight no matter what. But with the Verdugo, he kind of just gets back up again. It is wild. Literally, after I shot him the first time, I'm like, oh my god, how many shots does this dude take? But anyways, is once this is done, while the outside of the Verdugo looks okay, the interior is nothing more than liquefied jello. And I'm not even talking like the gelatinous kind. It's kind of like when you put it in the microwave and it just turns back into water. Don't ask me how I know that. But that's what you get for chasing me around for 3 terrifying minutes when I was 12 years old, as that elevator took way longer than I remembered. Also, that's probably a statement that needs phrasing.
Finally, some peace and quiet.
Well, anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leaving a like is greatly appreciated. Subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and Roanoke Tales channel link in the description for all those interested. Speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, huge thank you to our astrophysicist, Death's Dancer. Thanks, my man. I'd also like to thank our scientists, Chad W., Countryside Limbo, Lacune, Logan Satomi, and Tyson Nakanishi. Thank you guys very much. And to the rest of my patrons, I thank you as well. It's greatly appreciated, and it goes a long way towards keeping everything running, so thank you. All right, well, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.